Chapter 12. From somewhere in the far distance came the warbling call of Nogri combat code.
"The ship is approaching," Barkim translated. "Sakashash can see it."
"I'll take his word for it," Leia said. Hemmed in by the closely spaced trees that clustered on this small hill overlooking Patrick Minor's North Barris spaceport, she could see precious little but greenery around her, a minuscule patch of blue sky directly above her, and the land speeder they'd borrowed from Sabman beneath her. A slightly awkward situation, in her opinion, and probably unnecessary besides. Given that transmission had carried Bella Bliss's personal signature code and bridge break confirmation, it could be no one but the general on that incoming ship. But her Nogri guards hadn't wanted her to show herself until the ship's occupant was positively identified, and for the sake of their concerns, she had agreed to do this their way. She could hear the approaching ship now. "Sounds pretty small," she said, running through her Jedi sensory enhancement exercises to boost the distant whine into something clearer.
"It does indeed,"
Barkim's quiet agreement boomed uncomfortably loudly in her sensitized hearing.
"I will observe."
There was the crash of a body moving through foliage, the thunderous noise fading to whispers as Leia reduced her hearing back to its normal level. In the distance, she heard the whine blip up, then drop off sharply as the ship settled onto its pad and powered down. The sound faded away completely, and for a long minute there was nothing but the rustling of leaves around her. Leia waited, wondering what was going on out there. The grandly named spaceport was actually little more than a large open field with a handful of permacrete landing pads scattered around. It shouldn't take this long for Shakashak to get over to the ship and check it out. Unless there was some kind of trouble. She stretched out to the Force, seeking guidance. And then, drifting in on the breeze, came a second Nogri battle call.
"There is no danger, and we may come,"
Barkim said from her side, his voice slightly puzzled.
"But he warns that all is not as expected."
Leia frowned. Not as expected? What does that mean? Isn't Garm there?
"I do not know," Barkim said,
climbing into the land speeder and keying its repulsor lifts.
"I could see only that the ship was indeed small, as you had already ascertained, and that it bore no markings."
"No markings?" Leia asked carefully. "None?"
"None that I could see," Barkim said again, easing the land speeder through the trees. "Perhaps at a closer distance they will be visible."
Aside from a dilapidated grain freighter at the far end of the field, the newcomer was the only ship in sight. It was indeed a small vessel, probably a two-person craft, with the lines of a diplomatic shuttle, but of a design Leia couldn't remember ever having seen before. At the bow, where a diplomatic ship would have carried governmental markings, there was nothing. Midway along the side, the hatchway stood open, with a short ramp leading down from it to the permacrete. "Has Sakashak gone inside?" she asked.
"Yes," Barkim answered. "He is waiting with the pilot and passenger."
Pilot and passenger. Leia nodded mechanically, her eyes on the ship's bow. Now, as they neared the craft, she could see for the first time that there were indeed faint markings on the hull where some sort of insignia had once been. And even with just the outlines visible, there was something vaguely familiar about the design. Something that was triggering an equally vague but nevertheless disturbing memory. The land speeder came to a stop at the ramp.
"Counselor Organa Solo," Sakashak called down gravely from the open hatchway. "Your visitor humbly requests the honor of your presence."
"Of course," Leia said, matching the Nogri's formal tone. Sakashak knew Bella Bliss quite well. Who could be in there that would make him go all formal this way? "Would my visitor like to present his request in person?"
"He would," Sakashak said,
bowing slightly and stepping back out of the hatchway. And as he did so, a new figure stepped into view. A tall humanoid, covered with soft golden down, with subtle purple markings around his eyes and shoulders. "Peace to you, High Counselor Leia Organa Solo," he said, his voice smooth and rich, yet with an undertone of deep and ancient sadness to it. I am Elagos Akla, trustant for the Kamasi remnant. Will you join me aboard my ship? Leia swallowed hard as the memories came flooding back. Her visit as a child to the secret Kamasi refugee camps on Alderaan, and the hundreds of colorful flags flying Kamasi family crests that she'd seen there. Crests like the one that had been removed from the bow of Elagos's ship. Yes, Tristan Takla, she said. I would be honored. Please forgive my intrusion upon your privacy, the Kamasi said, backing away as she started up the ramp. I am told you and your bondmate came here for rest, and I would not normally have violated your aloneness. But I greatly wish to speak with you, and the one whom I brought with me said his errand was important to the point of terrible urgency. And that person is? Leia asked as she stepped into the ship, stretching out with the Force. There was definitely someone else here. Someone familiar. I believe you are acquainted with him, Elagos said, stepping out of the way to the side. And there in a chair in the back of the room, squirming nervously under Sakashak's watchful eye. Ghent! Leia exclaimed. What in the name of the Force are you doing here? I needed to talk to you right away, Ghent said, his voice sounding even more nervous than he looked as he bounded out of the chair. I wanted General Bella Bliss, but he's missing and I can't get a hold of him. And you're president of the New Republic and all, so... I'm not actually president at the moment, Ghent, Leia interrupted him gently. I'm on a leave of absence. Ponk Gaffersom is in charge of the government. Ghent blinked in surprise, and in spite of the seriousness in his manner, Leia had to fight to keep from smiling. Ghent had once been Talon Card's top slicer, with such an awesome talent for breaking into and otherwise manipulating computer systems that Bella Bliss had made it his personal goal to lure the kid away from Card's organization. In the years since the general had succeeded in doing so, Ghent had proved himself over and over, rising steadily through the ranks until he now held the post of Crypt Chief. But away from his beloved computers, the young man was about as naive and innocent and lost as it was humanly possible to be. The fact that, living in the heart of Coruscant, he'd still managed to miss Leia's leave of absence entirely was just about normal for him. Perhaps she can still be of assistance, Elagos suggested, stepping into Ghent's embarrassed consternation with typical Kamasi aplomb. Why don't you tell her why you're here? Yeah, sure, Ghent said, recovering his voice and digging a datapad out of an old and worn holder on his belt. You see, General Bella Bliss gave us me a data card. One moment, Sakashak's harsh voice cut him off. Was it you who sent Counselor Organa Solo a message over Bella Bliss's name? Well, yeah, Ghent admitted, eyeing the Nogri warily. I wanted the General, you see, but I couldn't get to him, and I found out Leia was here. What do you mean you couldn't get to him? Leia interrupted. Where is he? Has something happened? No, he's off in the Cothless system, Ghent assured her quickly, his eyes reluctantly shifting away from the Nogri to her. Some kind of ship build-up. I don't know what for. But I couldn't get a message through to him, not even with top clearance codes. So when I found out you were here... How did you find out that she was here? Sakashak demanded. Ghent squirmed again. Well, it was in Gaverson's files. I mean, I wouldn't usually slice into High Council stuff, but it was really important. And then I met him. He waved helplessly at Elagos. I was waiting at your office for you, the Kamasi spoke up, his voice sending a wave of welcome calmness through the room. As my two colleagues made clear when you spoke with them, we are deeply concerned about the direction this matter has taken. Now, with overt threats towards the Bothan people, that concern has been greatly magnified. He shrugged, the gesture rippling through his entire back up to his shoulders. I had of course planned to wait until you returned to speak further with you, but Crypt Chief Ghent was so insistent that he see you immediately that I offered him transport, provided he was able to locate you. And provided he could use Garm's private signature code to make sure I'd come to the spaceport, Leia asked, lifting her eyebrows at Ghent. The young slicer winced. I didn't think you'd come if it was just me, he muttered. Leia suppressed a sigh. Yes, that was indeed classic Ghent. In actual fact, his name and expertise carried enormous weight among the upper levels of the New Republic government. Another fact he'd undoubtedly missed completely. And as for bringing Elagos along, Ghent probably didn't have the faintest idea of how to fly a starship himself. Frustrating and annoying, but it all fit. All right, relax, she said. The interrogation is over, and all is at least temporarily forgiven. Now, what is this errand that was worth breaking half a dozen laws for? Wincing again, Ghent handed her the datapad in his hand. It's really a message for Bella Bliss, he said. But look, just read it, okay? Leia took the datapad and keyed it on. On the other hand, she couldn't help wondering if she'd known that it was only Ghent and not Bella Bliss who wanted to see her. Would she have pushed harder for Han to take her along on this trip into the heart of the Empire? Even without Ghent's message, the reasons he seemed right had seemed right and proper at the time, but still. And then the words popped onto the datapad display, and an icy chill ran through her. Where did you get this? She asked, her voice sounding unreal through the sudden pounding in her ears. General Bella Bliss brought it back from Morisham, Ghent said, his voice trembling now too. There was a Corellian corvette that came into the system. Only a Star Destroyer caught up with it and took it away. I remember reading Garm's private report on that, Leia said. He wanted the incident kept quiet while he tried to find out what it was all about. Well, this was a transmission from the corvette, Ghent said. It was all mangled up, but I was able to sort through the jamming and untangle it. He took a noisy breath. You see why I had to get it to someone right away? Leia nodded silently, staring down at the message. Is Colonel Maze Vermal, special envoy from Admiral Pelion, sent here to contact General Bella Bliss concerning the negotiation of a peace treaty between the Empire and New Republic. My ship is under attack by traitorous elements of the Empire, and I do not expect to survive. If the New Republic agrees to hold such discussions, Admiral Pelion will be at the abandoned gas mining center on Pesiton in 1 month to meet with you. Repeating, this is Colonel Maze Vermal. Counselor, Sakashek murmured quietly from across the room. Is there trouble? Leia looked up at the Nogri, almost startled to find him there as thoughts swirled through her mind. A peace treaty. Not a temporary truce, but an actual, genuine peace. Something she'd been looking for and longing for since the days of Emperor Palpatine and her own youthful decision to oppose him and all he stood for. And here it was, being offered to them by the Supreme Commander of the entire Imperial fleet. Or was it? Pelion was only offering to negotiate, after all. Were there preconditions that would be brought up at such a meeting? Conditions that would turn the whole exercise into little more than a waste of time, or worse, a propaganda coup for the Empire? Or was it worse even than that? Was it some sort of trap? Counselor, Sakashek repeated, stepping to her side, his large black eyes gazing with concern up at her. What disturbs you? Wordlessly, she handed the datapad to him. Because Pelion probably wasn't in charge of the Empire anymore. If Lando was to be believed, and if that wasn't some sort of trick itself, Grand Admiral Thrawn had returned. And with Thrawn, nothing was ever what it seemed. Ever. Sakashak spat something vicious-sounding in the Nogri language. You cannot believe this, he growled, thrusting the datapad back at Ghent as if it were something unclean he was disgusted to even touch. The Empire is the embodiment of lies and treachery. It will never be otherwise. It's often been that way, yes, Leia agreed soberly. On the other hand... There is no other hand, Sakashek snarled. They betrayed and murdered my people. They betrayed and murdered your people. I know, Leia murmured, the old ache rising again like acid in her throat. And if Thrawn has indeed cheated death, the Nogri went on, his voice turning to something deadly, then there is even more reason to reject anything the Empire might say. Probably, Leia said. And yet... May I see it? Elagos asked. Leia hesitated. Technically, this was highly confidential New Republic business. Yes, of course, she said, handing the datapad to him, her force-sensitized instincts overruling the strict legalities of the situation. Before the destruction of their world, the Kamasi had been among the greatest mediators and negotiators the Old Republic had ever known, their skills in such matters rivaling even those of the Jedi. Eligos might well have some insight that would help her sort it all out. For a long minute, the Kamasi studied the datapad in silence. Then, his blue-on-green eyes glittering with emotion, he lifted his gaze to her again. I see no alternative, he said. Yes, it may be a trap, but that is not certain. And if there is even a small chance that Admiral Pelion is sincere, that chance must be explored. Sakashek regarded the other suspiciously.
I have long admired the Kamasi, Trestant Akla, he said,
his voice on the edge of challenging.
But in this you speak the words of an unweaned child. Do you truly suggest Bella Bliss walk openly into the Empire's hands?
You misunderstand, my friend, Eligos said calmly. I offer no such course for General Bella Bliss. Indeed, as you have already pointed out, it would be impossible even to suggest it to him. Why? Leia asked. Because, as Ghent has discovered, we have no means of communicating quickly with him, Eligos said. And speed is vital, because this opportunity may even now be closing. He touched the datapad. I do not know when the Morisham incident took place, but it is clear that forces opposing Admiral Pelion have already begun to gather against him. Even if all overt attacks have failed, he cannot wait forever for Coruscant's response. Sakashek threw a wary glance at Leia.
Who, then, do you suggest be asked to walk into the Empire's hands?
Eligos shook his head. There is no need to ask anyone, he told the Nogri. The choice is apparent and obvious. I will go. Sakashak seemed taken aback.
You?
Of course, Eligos said. Councillor Organa Solo, I have an obligation to return Ghent to Coruscant. If you will accept that obligation upon yourself, I can leave for Pessiton immediately. Leia sighed. Now at last she understood why it had seemed right for her to let Han go to Bastion alone while she waited here. There's no need, Eligos, she said. You can take him back yourself. I'll be the one going to Pessiton. Sakashak made a noise in his throat.
I cannot allow you to do that, Councillor Organa Solo, he rumbled. To step into such danger.
I'm sorry, Sakashak, Leia said gently. But as Eligos said, there's only one choice possible. I'm the only one here who has the authority to negotiate on behalf of the New Republic.
Then bring someone else in from Coruscant, the Nogri demanded.
As Eligos has also said, we don't have time, Leia said. If Pelion is on schedule, he's been at Pessiton for 11 days already. I have to go, and I have to go now. She took a deep breath. If you can't handle dealing with Imperials, I'll certainly understand. I can take the Falcon and go alone.
Please do not insult me, Sakashak said darkly. Barkim Kanide will of course accompany you, even to death if that is what awaits us.
Thank you, Leia said. Thank you too, Ghent, for bringing this to me. You did the right thing, flagrant illegalities and all. Trestant Akla, I thank you too for your assistance here. Wait a minute, Ghent said, his eyes looking confused again. You're going out there? Alone?
Not alone, Sakashak growled. We will be with her.
Yeah, sure, Ghent said, looking back and forth between Leia and Eligos. I meant, Eligos, can't you... You know. Travel alongside her, the Kamasi said. Certainly. I would be more than willing to do so. Though I have no official standing with the New Republic, my people have some small skills at negotiation. He regarded Ghent thoughtfully. But as I have already explained, I have the prior obligation of returning you to Coruscant. Unless you're willing to take a shuttle over to Packwick Major and find a liner to take you back, Leia suggested.
But I didn't mean for you to.
Gent's face twisted into something almost painful looking.
I mean, I only brought you the message because.
He sighed, a great exhaling of air that seemed to shrink him down like a collapsing balloon.
Okay, he said in resignation. Yeah, okay, sure. I'll go with you too. Why not?
Leia blinked. It was not the decision she'd been expecting from him. I appreciate the offer, Gent, she said, but it's really not necessary.
No, no, don't try to talk me out of it, Gent said. I got you into this. Might as well stick through to the end. Everybody says I need to get out more anyway.
Leia glanced at Elagos, caught the other's microscopic nod. Apparently, 3 days alone in the two-man ship with the Kamasi had done Gent a world of good. Or else the young slicer was finally beginning to grow up. All right, she said. Thank you. Thank you all. She glanced around the room. We'll have to take the Falcon, I'm afraid. This ship is too small for all of us. It's about a 20-minute land speeder ride away. Then let us go, Elagos said, gently prodding. There is little time to spare. 5 minutes later they were racing across the Packwick Minor landscape, the whistling of the wind the only sound as the 5 occupants sat wrapped in the silence of their own thoughts. What the others were thinking during that trip Leia never learned, but for herself, a new and disturbing thought had suddenly occurred to her. A Jedi, she knew, could often see or sense into the future, and as she herself had often done, could similarly gain a sense of the rightness of the path being taken, or the Jedi's own position along that path. She was seeing that rightness for herself now. But could any Jedi, she wondered, see ahead to his or her own death? Or would the path leading to that moment always remain in darkness? Feeling right and proper, perhaps, all the way up to the point of passage. She didn't know. Perhaps this would be the path where she would find out. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.